and welcome to the A to Z Sports Big Orange Podcast. I am Charlie Burris, as always, here with my co-host, A to Z Sports writer Zach Ragan. Wherever you listen throughout the world, we thank you so much for listening to us. We talk everything Vols every week here on the Big Orange Podcast. If you want to listen to it on the reg, go over to the A to Z Sports Podcast Network feed. Rate, review, subscribe. And if you subscribe, you won't miss an episode when we drop them on Mondays. YouTube.com, search up A to Z Sports and subscribe there, and you can see Zach and I's beautiful faces. Beauty, of course, is subjective. And at Charlie_Burris, at Zach TNT, at A to Z Sports, and Facebook.com/A to Z Sports Nashville, and A to Z Sports.com for all the stuff that we write on the old internet about sports in the state of Tennessee. Just want to start the show quickly, just with a quick shout out to a friend of the show and a friend on social media. We haven't ever actually met in real life, but he is certainly a homie, a staple of Vol Twitter, Dr. Vol. I'm not going to get into the personal stuff. You can, if you know him, you see him on social media, you probably kind of know what's going on. But thoughts and prayers out to the man. He's a great dude, and just prayers for him, for his family. He's having a hard time at the moment. I just want to give him a shout out because he's a great guy who has kind of been a fan through all of the nonsense that I've done, and like I said, a friend on social media. So thoughts and prayers for him, and a shout out here to start the show. And then we can move on and start the show incredibly. It's not always that this gets to happen with Tennessee sports, but it is, I guess, in the last couple of years, this has been happening more and more. We get to talk about a championship. The Tennessee wins. We got to do it a few weeks ago with Tennessee basketball winning the SEC tournament. And then now, Tennessee baseball, we'll see if they win the SEC tournament in just a few days. But they won the SEC regular season, and they won the SEC regular season with 4 games remaining on their schedule, 3 SEC games remaining. Arkansas ended up losing their series, I think, to Vandy, or did they end up winning it? They lost at least one game to Vandy, and so that gave Tennessee the SEC win on it. Vandy in extra innings beat Arkansas. It was all just poetic justice. It was a beautiful little sequence of events. Tennessee wins their game over Georgia. It comes down to, if Vandy wins this game against Arkansas, Tennessee wins the SEC regular season. And shout out to Vandy. They pulled it off. And Tennessee wins the SEC regular season championship. Great stuff. Got the shirts ordered. I hope you do too. But great news to start this one out. But Zach, man, what is up?
Not a whole lot. I want to ask you, I'm sure we've talked about this before with basketball, but what do you view as the better accomplishment in college baseball? Winning the regular season SEC or winning the tournament? Because there's so many games in baseball that winning the regular season really just shows what you accomplished all season, like through the grind of the season, winning tough weekend series. That's what it takes to do this. That's what Tennessee's been doing. They've won every series except one. But there's something special about winning a tournament as well. I just feel like in baseball it's a little different.
I agree that the regular season, it's not gonna mean as much because it isn't just that 1-1 victory where you can go, like, if Tennessee ends up playing Arkansas in the championship game in the tournament this week, you can go like, I beat you, we won this championship. It's more of a 1,000-foot view. But yeah, realistically, winning the regular season in baseball specifically, just because of the crazy up and downs of what a baseball season can bring, and Lord knows we've seen them, injuries, slumps, everything that's happened. To me, winning the regular season is really the more impressive feat, and especially winning the regular season the way that Tennessee did, where they're just, I believe at this point, 5 games ahead of Arkansas. It's absolutely absurd. and they just steamrolled their way through. I mean, 5 SEC losses in the entire span. The best SEC season ever was 3 losses in the SEC. So as good as this Tennessee team was, it is not the greatest SEC season ever. They pulled off a whole lot of greatest evers this season so far. That was not one of them, incredibly. And you almost go like, thank goodness it sort of came back down to earth here at the end of the season. You realize you get a little dose of reality, and it's actually probably good because you were flying so close to the sun with all of the, is this the greatest college baseball team of all time talk and crap like that. And I hate that. I hate it so much. It can be true. And I think it was true when people said it. At certain points in the season, Tennessee has looked like arguably probably one of the great college baseball teams of all time. And they are certainly, at least through the regular season, the best of this current season so far. But I don't mind the fact that the sweeps kind of stopped, because there was that expectation of like, well, are we going to sweep everybody? No, you're not.
Yeah.
You're not going to sweep everybody. It's not how baseball works. And I love how this has turned out. You're just comfortable for this final series against Mississippi State. Almost. I don't know if Vitello will really do this, but you could kind of rest guys, get everybody prepared for the postseason. We'll see what Vitello does, but it's exciting to have this thing locked up with season remaining.
Yeah, I don't think we're ever going to see like a new greatest college baseball team of all time. I don't know what team you would consider that from the past, but college baseball now, it's such a weird sport in the fact that it's not like college football. It's not like college basketball, where you need to recruit well, but you don't need to recruit super well, because if you go out there and you get commitments from the top high school baseball players in the country, well, half of those players are never going to make it on campus because they're going to be drafted out of high school. I mean, Tennessee's been on the end of that several times. I mean, famously, Mookie Betts, had signed with Tennessee or committed to Tennessee, and he's drafted early and he never steps foot on campus. And so it's a very strange sport where Tennessee's not going to go out there and just dominate in recruiting now, because you just don't know who's going to end up in town and who's not. And because of the way the talent's kind of distributed, it's really hard. I mean, it makes what Tennessee has done this year even more impressive. But I feel like this is kind of like the ceiling for what a college baseball program can do in this era.
Yeah, you'd have to think. I mean, this is nearly about as good as a regular season can get. Obviously, there has only been a couple of other SEC seasons that were better ever. Only a few regular seasons in general in big-time college baseball that have been better. I mean, it is right up there with some of the great all-time regular seasons. And to keep this going, this is why I've always, as much as he now bugs me after this year, it's why what Vandy's coach has always done has been so impressive. You go like, to be that stout for so long is extremely tough. And if Vitello can do that, it's unbelievably impressive. I do think it has to be so attractive. This is a cool little anecdote. My wife's cousin is 13, somewhere around in there, and he's big time baseball dude, and his aspiration is to play college baseball. I've talked to him about it. And we were talking to him on the phone this week, having a little family call. And I was like, hey, have you heard about Tennessee's closer who can throw up 106? And he's like, yeah, man, I've seen him. And it's like awesome. And we were talking about it. And he's not a Tennessee fan. He's a kid from Virginia. He's not like they're Virginia Tech fans. And he's heard and knows about this Tennessee baseball team, and you're getting that word out there, and it's cool, for a kid that's coming up and could potentially be, a recruit in the future. And it's those sorts of things that you go like, this is how you keep that train rolling. You make this thing look cool. You're the most prominent team in America. You have like this team has characters on the squad. with Honcho, Ben Joyce, Luke Lipschitz, like just these dudes that have their interest. It's an interesting team to watch play, and they do stuff that looks fun. Like to a kid coming up in high school, the fact that they put on a fur coat and a silly hat when they hit a home run, that has to be. You look at that and you go like, that's what I want to do. That in college, I want to hit a homer and then get a fur coat and a hat. Like those are the things that don't show up on a win-loss column, but that are going to keep your program great going forward. And it's really exciting. And I hope that Vitello can capitalize like it seems like he's probably going to.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I haven't really thought about that aspect of it, but you see so many comments from traditional baseball people that just hate Tennessee baseball. I mean, there's even some Tennessee fans that don't like, some older Tennessee fans that don't like the flair that this team plays with. But you're right. I mean, my 10-year-old is big into baseball, and we spend a lot of time at a lot of weekends at baseball fields. That's where we're at this past weekend, 4 hours away from home, playing in a baseball tournament. And you see a lot of the kind of college antics from 10-year-olds because that's what they're watching on YouTube. I mean, that's what they want to see. They like the bat flips. My kid's one of the more animated kids at times on the field, which is funny because I was never that way at all. But I mean, he bat flipped one time on a ball that he thought was out, and it hit the fence, and so he had to. I have it on video too. I remind him of it often. But that's what these kids want to do, and you can like it, you can hate it, but it's not going to change. I mean, kids they play with energy. They just enjoy that kind of environment, and yeah, they're going to gravitate towards that program. I mean, do you want to go play for Tony Vitello, or do you want to go play for Dave Van Horn in Arkansas, who doesn't like any of that stuff? And there's another element to the recruiting stuff here with Vitello in Arkansas that I wrote about a little this week. I had some Arkansas fans DMing me on Twitter, adding me on Twitter, because one thing in the youth baseball world is as parents, we're so much more involved with our kids' sports and their lessons and their practices. So it was way different than when we were kids. I remember my parents just dropping me off for baseball practice, come pick me up. Sometimes they drop me off for games, or they wouldn't come to my away games, stuff like that. And it's just not that way anymore. So parents are very involved. They want to make sure their kids are being taken care of. And you see somebody like Tony Vitello, who he might pull his pitchers early because he doesn't want to run their pitch counts up to 100, 120, 130 pitches a game because he's thinking about their future, beyond college baseball. And Dave Van Horn at Arkansas, we saw with Kevin Kopps last year. I mean, he threw almost 200 pitches in a single weekend, 180, 100
round.
I mean, that is not really, that's just not something you should do at all as a coach. And the kid, Kopps, I'm sure would tell you, I volunteered to do it. I mean, what college kid doesn't want to go out there and compete? They want to win for their team. These teams are super close. But as the coach, you kind of got to take care of them. You got to protect them from themselves. Vitello does that. And I think that's something that kids will gravitate towards as well.
You saw it this weekend. He starts Ben Joyce, who has been a reliever and sometimes closer for Tennessee this season. And, people were like, whoa, this is crazy. A kid who could throw, routinely throw like 103 starting for Tennessee. And it's kind of, it was a mixed bag of an outing, but generally pretty good. And Vitello, after the fact, he goes, he's just asked about it, and he says, I think Ben Joyce could be a starter in the pros. And so we're going to give him that shot. It was something to that effect. I don't know the exact quote off the top of my head, but it was something to that effect. And you see the motivation in Vitello there, where he is here for these guys. He wants these guys to be featured. He wants them to put their best foot forward, obviously to win baseball games, but for their future. And that's the perfect example right there. Because, yeah, you look at Joyce, you don't go, oh, yeah, a guy throwing heat like that is certainly going to be a starter. You go like, that kid could be a killer closer in the pros.
But the thing with that is that MLB teams don't typically draft a guy to be a closer. Typically, those guys
Yeah.
get transitioned to that at some point in the minors when they maybe they don't develop a third or fourth pitch, or they just don't have the length to go 5, 6, 7 innings deep into a game. Joyce, I think Vitello knows that's what Joyce wants to do. I think he knows that that's his best shot at getting drafted, and then maybe he transitions to that closer role. Because I'm kind of with you. I think that's where he ultimately ends up throughout his career. But I think Ben Joyce probably could have benefited Tennessee as a starter this year. I mean, imagine him going 5, 6 innings. But Vitello's kind of, he's coming back from Tommy John surgery. He's eased him back into the mix. That's kind of why he's been out of the bullpen, where you're not throwing a lot on him this first year coming back, which is the smart thing to do. It's the proper way to handle Ben Joyce. But he could have easily just put him out there and ran his pitch counts up, his innings up, and kind of put him in that starter role. And maybe it helps Tennessee win more games than they did. But then maybe Joyce runs into arm problems next year when he's not at Tennessee. Well, Vitello's showing that he's putting the kid and his future above, the program in a way, which is, I mean, what more could you ask for if you're a college athlete wanting to go pro, or if you're a parent of that college athlete?
Yeah, because you know that Joyce is going to go from there. And if he ever talks to a kid who's coming up and getting talked to by Tennessee, he's going to go like, you know what Tony did for me? He put me up on the
Mhm.
mound as a starter. He gave me that shot, and he wanted me to kind of get my name out there as a potential starter for MLB to help me out. And that's invaluable. That's what a recruit
Mhm.
wants to hear. Why would it's massive stuff like that. And don't discount it. Like I said, it's stuff that doesn't show up in a win-loss column, but is extremely valuable. And so hopefully, even if the season doesn't turn out with the national championship like we'd all hope, the ideal situation is that this becomes essentially a dynasty would be nice. That's probably the strongest way that I could put it. That would be great.
It does
But
feel like he's the next one of those kind of long time, well known SEC baseball coaches at this point.
I
Like it's the
want
beginning of a
him,
long tenure.
yes, I want him to be the guy who everybody else in college baseball goes like, ugh, why do we have to deal with this? It's all of us with Saban in college football. We all go like, God, why doesn't that guy just retire? All of our lives would be easier. And this would just be so much nicer if he would just get out of the sport. I want Vitello to be that guy. Let's have one of those.
Well,
I don't care that it's not in football.
Ole Miss fans are already clamoring for him on social media. I
Oh
mean,
man.
they want to hire him, and I know we've talked about it before, but it feels like when Tennessee fans thought that they could steal like Chris Peterson from Washington or something like that. Like it's not going to happen. It's
If
just not.
he if he wasn't going to leave for LSU, which is the
Hmm.
cream of the crop in college baseball jobs, one of the best, he wasn't going to leave for LSU. He's not going to go to Ole Miss.
No.
I mean, come on. Hello, somebody. Let's wake up. But I have seen that they want their guy gone. And this, I am pretty interested just to add into this talk. Although we will have another show before the tournament starts. This SEC tournament's going to be interesting. Obviously, Arkansas is
Hmm.
very good. Tennessee hasn't played Arkansas yet. Um, if
I
I
wonder.
believe it, just go ahead.
I wonder just how improved the ratings for this SEC tournament will be with a good Tennessee team. I think it's going to
Yeah,
be a huge difference because we know how Tennessee fans lock in and watch. I mean, they are. I don't know. It should be a big boost to their ratings. It's just the Tennessee effect is proven. I mean, we know that it's a thing, and that I'm surprised that they haven't utilized it more and put more of these games on normal television. It's so easy to stream. A lot of people stream primarily. That's all they use. And fans still seem to complain about not being able to find the games. So I wish they would make them a little more accessible for some of those fans.
I have to imagine if the final ends up being Tennessee and Arkansas. Although I
Oh,
believe Arkansas has some jockeying to do. They're tied in the SEC right now with Texas A&M. Texas A&M has closed out this season really strong, and they're kind of an interesting rogue element and all of that we weren't expecting near the beginning of the SEC season. But if that ends up being the final and there's all that history there and the jawing back and forth that went on between Vitello and Van Horn last year, and I mean that will genuinely be for a true SEC sports fan of whatever school, you're going to look at that and be intrigued. As long as you care about baseball at all, you're going to look at that and be like, oh, you got these Tennessee boys with all this swagger going up against these guys that they have history with. That's compelling television. And I'm sure ESPN loves that. I'm sure they're probably hoping that Tennessee. It's interesting to be in that position. They're probably hoping that Tennessee doesn't lose because that will hurt their ratings. Make no mistake about that.
For sure.
Yeah, that's we always say that in sports. I was definitely saying it in this Grizzlies series with Golden State, a longtime Grizzlies guy. It certainly felt like at times the refs were kind of going like, we need Steph in the Western Conference Finals.
Especially after Ja Morant was hurt. I mean, what a blow to the NBA playoffs in general and just NBA fans. I mean, I'm a guy that I'm a Charlotte Hornets fan. I go to games and watch them play as often as I can, but when it comes to the NBA playoffs, they haven't been relevant in rarely ever, to be honest. So I'm a guy who I just want to see the stars. Like I lean towards the Grizzlies because they're in Tennessee. I love Ja Morant, but I want to see big stars. I'm glad Luka has kind of went on this tear. It's going to be fun to watch him in the Western Conference Finals. So,
but it's so much more compelling. It's interesting. Not to get too deep on the NBA, but I think it's kind of it's an interesting, just like sort of character study in terms of sports, where you go like, when LeBron was younger, it was the most interesting thing to see the greatest athlete of our generation go into the finals. That has gotten boring. Like people are kind of tired. We're LeBron'd out, and I think a lot of people were pretty happy to see them not make the playoffs and kind of go like, all right, we don't have to. We got a lot of new up and coming stars. A lot of guys, Luka and Ja, and all of these guys, they're really making noise, and let's give them a shot on this big stage. And I think it's incredible television, especially with the Mavs they beat the Suns by 40. Most embarrassing Game 7 performance of all time.
It didn't help with Devin Booker and Chris Paul's actions throughout the series. Chris Paul might be the sorest loser of all time in basketball. Maybe him and Isaiah Thomas. Like that's what it feels like to me.
I mean,
and I like Chris Paul. We're from the same town. We're literally born in the same hospital, like a day apart. I mean,
really,
I like Chris. Yes, I like Chris Paul, but I mean, he's been that way since college.
He definitely has been. I mean, as much as the Grizzlies played the Timberwolves in the first round, and Pat Beverly was so annoying in that whole series. He was jawing the entire time and doing the too small thing to Ja Morant. But he goes, and obviously it was great. It was very gratifying to beat the Timberwolves in that first series. But he goes on ESPN the morning after the Suns get waxed, and what did he call Chris Paul? A traffic cone or something? I was like, this is hilarious. And bring this guy back on. Have him talk more, because he just went on, he's no BS. And I appreciate it. But it's point being, it's interesting to see new blood, to see like Tennessee is bringing that fresh swagger to college baseball that college baseball needed. I mean, you see third parties. I think it was the CWS 24/7 guy, College World Series 24/7 dude on Twitter, wrote an entire thing on his website about how Tennessee baseball is what college baseball needed. It's like an injection of energy. You need something fresh, something new that's going to actually intrigue people. And that's, I'm sure ESPN's got to be happy about that, because it's sort of a sport that's a crapshoot for them, because it's right on the edge of being viable as a television product, but not totally. It doesn't bring a big enough crowd for that. So, hey, happy to be that team for ESPN if they need it. We'll bring the viewers. Don't worry, ESPN. We'll carry you.
It'll be interesting to see if they change their strategy on baseball, SEC baseball next season, after kind of seeing the interest in Tennessee this year.
Yeah, I think it's got to be something that they're taking notice of, if nothing.
Because I get it. It's too late. You make these plans, these programming plans. You can't just switch it on a dime, even though it feels like you can. I mean, that stuff's playing months and months in advance. So I get for this season how it's kind of had to work out the way it has, but hopefully next year we get more of these Tennessee primetime weekend baseball in the spring.
Yeah, you might do a little bit more of like putting SEC games on like ESPN2 and some stuff.
I mean, what
Throwing
else are
them
you
on.
showing in February and March and early
Yeah.
April? They only show a couple of MLB games a week. It doesn't really run. It doesn't interfere with that at all.
Isn't this when we were kids? I don't think they show this anymore, but this was like World's Strongest Man season for ESPN.
Mm-hmm.
They always Magnus for Magnuson and
yes,
all the world's strongest guys.
I remember many summer mornings watching ESPN2, watching Sports Center till it would go off at 11 a.m. or something, and then that afternoon programming comes on. But give me a midday college baseball game on a Wednesday at like 3:00. I mean, it's perfect.
Watch the heck out of that. Hopefully it changes their strategy a little bit. Obviously, we'll have to see. But that's the Tennessee baseball talk as we have in most weeks. They're interesting enough for us to go long about them. Like we talked longer than I probably was planning. I don't mind. Tennessee baseball is awesome this season. It's worth the discussion. But let's also dive into some other good things happening for Tennessee. I think for the most part, we got good stuff for this week. Julian Phillips, 6'8", small forward from Branson, Missouri, a bona fide, unanimous 5-star on the recruiting services. He chooses Rick Barnes and the Tennessee Volunteers as his college of choice. And this was, for a lot of people, including me, pretty unexpected. I had kind of resigned his Tennessee basketball season. You're probably going to take a step back from the SEC championship year. And, you're losing Kennedy Chandler. You lost Brandon Huntley Hatfield. And you kind of look now and you go like, you got to kind of wonder, is this why they let Huntley Hatfield walk? Because Julian Phillips is a similar size physically. He plays a different style from Huntley Hatfield. But you kind of wonder some things like that where hindsight becomes a little clearer. But this is a huge pickup for a kid that could potentially be a starter because the position that he plays is sort of in flux for Tennessee right now. That forward position, you're not really sure if it's going to be Kamwa. You thought it was going to be Huntley Hatfield kind of battling with Kamwa, and Huntley Hatfield is gone. So it's an interesting piece and a massive pickup and just a continued recruiting success for Rick Barnes. He just continues to impress. Just when you think he's finally going back down the other side of the hill, he picks up a Julian Phillips.
Yeah, it was very unexpected to me. I mean, it felt like it was trending towards Auburn. There was rumors that maybe he's going to go to the NBA G League. I don't know if you saw the report from On3 where they say that he turned down an $800,000 contract with the NBA G League program, which that was the end of the report. And On3 did not speculate on any sort of NIL deal that he may or may not have received from a collective associated with Tennessee. But I think we can all make a fair assumption that the NIL situation kind of helped Tennessee out there a bit. And if that's the case, then good for Tennessee. I mean, go get your guy. Auburn was obviously in that same stratosphere, and Tennessee went a little further than they did. Or maybe he just maybe the deals were similar and he liked Tennessee better. Or maybe he said no to $800,000 and signed for free. That's maybe
maybe
not quite as plausible, but we can't rule it out. Either way, Tennessee got their guy, and he's very exciting kid that if he develops into a shooter, I mean, man, plays great defense. I mean, it's a great all-around pickup for Tennessee. And he's originally from the central part of South Carolina, not far from where Ja Morant is from. So maybe that area is pretty fertile recruiting grounds.
Yeah, whatever you got to do to get these kids in the door, I'm obviously fine with it within reason.
$800,000 is a lot to turn down from a G League team. Yeah. So I'm not
Tennessee's
sure how does that affect. I don't know. I think that's just recently become a thing where you could go to the G League. I know LaMelo Ball like went overseas to play for a year instead of playing in college. So I'm
I,
not sure how that affects your draft status or where you can
yeah.
land or what kind of pool are you thrown into then.
I that's what I wondered with that is where does it put you if you get taken with a G League team and in terms of the future draft and where like a team might want to pick you up. The whole thing it's it's new like you're saying
Mm-hmm.
and it's interesting because there definitely could be a factor of the G League's their selling of the product to these players just might not be that strong. I think you might have guys that go like, "Hey, you're going to get a little more exposure at the college level. Also, you're going to have a chance to go win a championship." I think Rick Barnes has a good reputation. I think clearly he has a good reputation among in these circles with kids. You wouldn't be getting these recruits if he didn't. And so
I'm
because it's
guessing I'm guessing that Grant Williams' stellar play here in the NBA
yeah.
final or NBA playoffs, where he's kind of developed into such a key player for the Celtics, and he's kind of like the guarding the other team's best player at times at
Mm-hmm.
this point. I mean, he's really got a lot of attention over the last couple of months. So I mean, that's got to help Rick Barnes as well.
Yeah, it's kind of those what we were talking about doesn't show up in win-loss column sort of things where Grant Williams going out giving Giannis a really hard time in a great series that was a great watch if you didn't watch it, and then he has his career game in Game 7. Grant Williams
Mm-hmm.
does. I mean that honestly that stuff helps in recruiting. I mean, you can't because specifically because Grant is a big ambassador for the University of Tennessee. Thankfully, he's not a guy who went to Tennessee. He's like a Tobias Harris. He doesn't come around that much anymore and you don't associate him with Tennessee. Grant Williams still gets associated a lot with Tennessee. Obviously a younger guy than Tobias Harris at this point and more recently played at Tennessee, but still like Grant is still out here like tweeting about Tennessee basketball games when they happen and is a real Tennessee guy. And it's important. That stuff is genuinely important. Like not just getting guys to the league, but having guys that have success in the league is huge.
A lot of NBA talk, but speaking of Tobias Harris, did you see Jimmy Butler's kind of the shade that he threw towards Tobias Harris after one of the games this
I
past
don't think
week?
so.
He said somehow he's walking in the locker room and I guess shouted towards maybe fans. Somebody caught it where he was like Tobias Harris over me, where he was drafted after Tobias Harris several years back. So kind of interesting little shade at a former Tennessee player, or not really. I mean, it is shade at the former Tennessee player, but I think it's more shade at the teams that passed over Jimmy Butler.
Yeah, I mean Jimmy Butler was definitely under the radar. The is what it is. Obviously, hindsight 2020 on him, but nonetheless, great pickup for Rick Barnes. And you also you got I don't want to mess this name up, but Toby Awaka, I believe is how this is pronounced. Who's another forward, not ranked by the rating systems so far. At least I could see. Let me see his profile here. Yeah, 247 and the composite don't have a rating for him, but he's out of the Bronx, New York. He played on the AAU team that Zakai Ziegler comes from in New York, so that's nice to kind of tap that pipeline because obviously Zakai has been a revelation and an incredible pickup for Barnes and the boys. So I love this because I don't want to say I was really down on this basketball season, but it felt like you may have reached the pinnacle of the Rick Barnes getting 5-star recruits and that whole thing. That was sort of a surprise all in itself that he started doing that because initially with Barnes recruiting was a little shaky, and then all of a sudden it was elite. And then you kind of felt like, all right, Kennedy Chandler, we hadn't gotten another 5-star, and you're not sure if it's so hard to get a 5-star in general. There's so few of them, and they all get sucked up by Kentucky and Kansas and all these schools, and it keeps that momentum going. And I'm impressed, and congratulations to everybody involved, and hopefully Phillips becomes a powerful player for Tennessee. That would be nice. We need more of them, given the circumstances. Although most of the team from last year is returning, just to add a piece like this is big. It's good.
Yeah, I think picking up a Walker there, it after Barnes and his staff identified Zakai Ziegler, a very under the radar guy, and brought him in, and the huge role that he played last year, a really huge reason for their success. He was really the heart of that team, and to have him coming back. The fact that they identified him, brought him in, kind of gives you like, hey, did they find another hidden gem that maybe a power forward here that can really do some things inside, something Tennessee could use. That's an interest. He's Gatorade Player of the Year, Maryland, St. John's, some other schools kind of recognized him late too. So maybe a late bloomer, maybe a bit of a hidden gem here.
And it would be nice to finally have a hidden gem at a size position, because that's been, I would say, the biggest struggle of the Rick Barnes era is finding a great big man. Because when you found him in Grant Williams, you were the number one team in America and had one of the best regular seasons Tennessee has ever had, and blah 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 blah. We all watch it happen, and so. And it's been a struggle to find anything else down low for Rick Barnes since Grant Williams. And so if they could find a little needle in a haystack, that would be excellent and a welcome addition. And I mean, I will say, I saw that name, and the initial reporting was he's not rated by the rating services, and you're kind of skeptical initially, and then you look at it and he comes from the same pipeline as Zakai Ziegler, and you go, all right, okay. I like this. I like the sound of that. That's good. So we'll see. Obviously, that with Awaka, it's going to be a time will tell sort of pickup. But if you could have another surprise ad that can really immediately contribute, that would be excellent. I'm all for it, and hopefully, it just gives me a little more hope for this basketball season too. Because I was kind of like, oh man, going to be coming down the other side of the hill. Obviously, assuming that Josiah Jordan-James comes back and you get some of those dudes back in the fold. I don't know. It was hard for me to think that it would be as good as last year. I would put it that way, but maybe they can do it now. You've added some really nice pieces, so we'll just have to see.
I'm pretty sure that Josiah Jordan-James and Vescovi will return. Neither one were invited to the NBA draft combine, which really surprised me. I thought they would at least be invited, but I'm not sure how many invites usually go out for that kind of stuff. But once you're not invited to that, I think it pretty much seals your fate as to you're not really going to get the feedback that you're looking for, or at least not to the extent that you were looking for. So I think for sure they'll be back.
If James can lock in absolutely consistently as a shooter this upcoming season, I think he's an excellent NBA prospect. Vescovi, I mean, it's exciting if he can really be a shooter. I could see him as kind of a backup point guard on a team, but that might be his height. And watch me eat those words, and he becomes a star. I don't know, but that would be awesome. But you just look at his
he's got to take care of the ball a little better. I feel like to be an NBA level player.
And the NBA is such a different animal. Yeah. The speed of play and just how you have to be at that extra level. It just is. I think I've said it on this show before. It's one of those things that it's like porn. You can't describe it, but you know it when you see it. It's like that's a pro skill set right there. And I think Josiah Jordan-James, like I said, if he's an absolutely elite defender, he's an NBA defender already. I think he could hang at an NBA level.
And there's a place for that always.
There is. Absolutely. I mean, look at how effective in the final two games of the Grizzlies series with Golden State good defense was. They really clamped down without John Morant, really clamped down defensively and gave obviously one of those games and really gave Golden State a hard time. And so Yves Pons has found a spot. He's actually in the Grizzlies farm system. And that can be valuable when, yeah, the shooting is not totally there, but you can be elite on defense. It's valuable, and you can find a spot that way. So I we'll have to see how that turns out, but I think let's take advantage of them while assuming they still come back. It hasn't been officially announced, obviously, but let's definitely take advantage of these guys because clearly, I mean, they're right there. They're right near that NBA level, if nothing else, and that's going to make you one of the best players in college basketball. And so you have a couple of those guys, plus these 5-star recruits, plus other really nice role players, and so keep it going. Let's keep it going and just and maybe someday finally shed this Barnes can't do it in the NCAA tournament. Maybe one day we'll we got the SEC tournament off our back. We got that one done. But
It's
the
just
NCAA tournament's still there.
It's one thing at a time. He's
Exactly.
done better with 5 stars. Check
Yeah.
that off the list. SEC tournament. So maybe next year we can watch him, progress to the Elite Eight or Final Four.
We've never said this as Tennessee fans. Next year is our year.
Yeah.
That's
It never fails, no matter what kind of content I post on social media that is optimistic about Tennessee. It's just other fan bases come out of the woodwork to comment that same thing. Oh
always.
yeah, all Tennessee fans next year. Just wait till next year.
Well,
next year's finally started showing up in some of these sports. So
yeah, some of them you're finally having the next year. It's actually happening. You got a few more things to clamp down. It just, I mean, some of these it's just so hard. Like to win the NCAA tournament. Like Bill Self is a legend. He's an absolute legend, and he went in between his national titles. How long was it? 12 years or something? I think it's hard to win a national championship, and he had excellent teams through that period. I mean, you had years with like Joel Embiid and like just some real star power on those Kansas teams, and he didn't win. And then finally this year, where it was kind of unassuming, they weren't the preseason favorite, and they win a national championship. So it's a weird sport, kind of like baseball too. It's a weird sport. It's gonna be tough to win, even as good as Tennessee has been in the regular season. So good talk there. Plenty of positivity, feeling good, and we'll end the show with this in the final portion of the episode. Last week we talked about Tennessee and these new NIL rules that the NCAA has rolled out. Well, they're not rules. NIL guidelines. That's they had to frame it correctly. And it's the NCAA going out and trying to get a hold at all on their remaining relevancy, which they essentially have none. There's growing and growing talk about breaking away from the NCAA, which thank God, please praise the Lord that we're actually having serious talks about breaking away from the NCAA. Finally, it's been a long time coming, but these new rules and whether the NCAA is going to come for Tennessee, because what they're trying to do is make NILs into boosters, and boosters cannot have contact with players before they're at the school. And so if you make these collectives, not NILs, these collectives, you make collectives into boosters, and boosters can't have contact with players before they get to the school. And so is Tennessee breaking the rules by having the collectives that they have contact with recruits? Essentially, we kind of chalked it up to that's nonsense. Good luck with that, NCAA. You're just, they're just grasping at straws finally, and they're in the death throes of the final stages of the NCAA. But we talked about in that clip that the pushback on the NIL Wild West that Tennessee is obviously taking part in, some of the biggest purveyors of pushback were Nick Saban and Kirby Smart and the Georgia Alabama programs. And I posted a video, and admittedly, a little bit of clickbait. Hey, we play this game. I'm here for eyeballs, okay? I do. This is how we make money. Look, you make money at your job. This is what we make money from getting eyeballs on stuff, okay? It is what it is. And I posted on YouTube a clip of us talking about that. And I titled it, what was the exact title? Tennessee's NIL recruiting is scaring Nick Saban. And I put a picture of Nick Saban like yelling and Josh Heupel, and it was a whole thing. Alabama fans found it, and they had some thoughts about what we said. And we said, I think saying that Saban is scared is probably an overstatement. I don't know, he's scared. That's probably not the correct framing, but it pisses him off. I can tell you that. And if you're him, you're not happy about it. The landscape is changing under his feet, and he's having to adapt yet again. And he's been so good at that in his career. But just and I think he wants to hold on to what has made him so successful. And I think you agree, Zach. We were pretty much in agreement on that. But we just wanted to go through and read these comments. And there were a bunch of Alabama fans. And here, I just want to get your thoughts initially, Zach. I'll give mine too. Here's a couple of these. And you can go to A to Z Sports on YouTube and see these comments for yourself. This guy says, Tennessee offers a kid $8 million because they have to be able to get the kid. Bama, Georgia, Ohio State don't have to. You hear that? I know my immediate thoughts on it. When you hear that, Zach, what is your thought?
Well, I mean, maybe Alabama and Ohio State and Georgia haven't offered $8 million to a kid. I mean, it's inflation right now, right? Recruits cost more than they used to, but Alabama and Georgia have definitely paid for recruits. I mean, look, in the world of recruiting, it's a dark world at times, and there's a lot of shady stuff that goes on that never, ever, ever sees the light of day. And a lot of these 4 and 5 star recruits, I mean, somebody that's like top 5 player in the country, programs are having to pay just to get in the room with these kids initially. I mean, that is something that happens, and we know happens. I know firsthand it happens. So the idea that Alabama and Georgia and Ohio State and any top program has ever been completely clean is just absolutely insane. I mean, it doesn't matter what level you're at. Alabama is going to be recruiting against somebody. They're not going to be recruiting much against Vanderbilt or Kentucky or Kansas or any of these kind of lower bottom of the conference teams, but they will be recruiting against Georgia, Ohio State, USC, Notre Dame, a lot of major programs, Texas. And it's the same battle. It's just different opponents that you're going against. So yeah, of course they have to work in some financial incentive. I mean, those kids, they have the leverage. Everybody wants them. They're going to parlay that into a payday. Why wouldn't you? So no, Tennessee's not doing anything any different than anybody else is doing.
There was a time in the early 2010s when Kentucky basketball with Calipari was getting every 5-star that hit the market. I mean, just all of them. And they had these transcendent teams that were so good. Ultimately, they only got one national championship out of it, which is hilarious, frankly. But I remember specifically, I don't know. I don't want to attribute, but I'm pretty sure it was Matt Jones at Kentucky Sports Radio. We had him on the show I was on, and his take was that Kentucky didn't have to pay players like everybody else because they're just so good. It's Kentucky. We're so good. You can come here and play in the Final Four, and all the 5-stars can be here with you. We don't have to pay the play. And again, I think it was Matt Jones. I don't know. Don't go and like.
It sounds just like something he'd say, so I can buy it.
But it was somebody like that. And I go, are you delusional? Like, do you have a realistic thought in your head? Because if this kid, I mention this last week, in the last couple of weeks, I think. So I apologize if I'm sort of repeating myself here, but like Louisville gets outed with Rick Pitino that they paid a kid $200,000. And if that kid went to Louisville for $200,000, how much do you think Kentucky is paying these kids? They can get $200,000 Louisville, and they're choosing Kentucky over Louisville. So how much is that kid getting? Because he could go to Louisville and get $200,000. They don't have to pay anybody? What? Are you got to be kidding me. You got to be absolutely kidding me. Because here's what I know when it comes to Alabama and recruiting, and we don't have to pay $8 million for our recruits. Here's what I know. Texas A&M was the number one recruiting class in America last year. The report came out that they put together some big deals for these kids, and Jimbo Fisher has kind of denied it and walked around it and whatever. We know what's going on here. They got that oil money at Texas A&M. You know, all of those engineers and everybody that comes out of there, they're willing to pay. And like half of the last few governors of the state of Texas went there and stuff. Like they got big donors and alumni. And here's what I know. Evan Stewart, 5-star receiver, didn't go to Alabama. He went to Texas A&M, and Texas A&M reportedly paid. Gabriel Brownlow-Dindy didn't go to Alabama. He went to Texas A&M. Connor Wegman went to Texas A&M, didn't go to Alabama. And here's the thing. Alabama probably wanted a few of those guys. And yet they went to Texas A&M, who has not won. And they did beat Alabama last year. Incredibly, that was a weird apparition of a game. But so if those kids are going to Texas A&M and Alabama's still getting these 5-star recruits and being competitive in this market, I can tell you this: Alabama is paying these kids. Yeah, it might not be $8 million. Tennessee's price tag might be a skosh higher. Sure, that's fine. But if you think that these kids are just going to Alabama for the A on the jersey, and we don't have to do that. We're Ohio State and Alabama and Georgia. We can get all these recruits. What world are you living in where you think that you don't have to play the game that everybody else is playing? You're not above this. This is everybody is playing in the snake pit. Everybody's a viper. Everybody that's actually competitive. That's what I always say it. College football is a snake pit, and if you're not a viper, you're gonna get eaten. That's what it is. You have to be that guy. Hugh Freeze can go out here and act like he is the reverend of a megachurch, but at the end of the day, he was cheating and paying recruits. It doesn't matter.
That's the perfect example for Texas A&M and for these other programs. Texas A&M comes out of nowhere. They have the number one class. Yeah, and we know that they're paying. In 2013, I think Ole Miss came out of nowhere, had like a top 5, top 10 class or something, and there was everybody instantly is like they have to be cheating. Like, where did Ole Miss just out of nowhere? They hadn't really started having. I don't know if that was Hugh Freeze's first year or how long he had been there at that point, but they hadn't really. I don't think they'd beat Alabama yet. They hadn't got to the point where they were giving Alabama a tough time on a regular basis. All of a sudden, they come out of nowhere and they got like one of the best classes in the country. And then several years later, we find out, oh yeah, Hugh Freeze and Ole Miss was doing some shady stuff. Every single time a class comes out of nowhere, it's because money's involved. So yeah, of course, we know Tennessee is using NIL stuff to their advantage. But the question is, who really cares when it's been going on for so long that this is how you build good recruiting classes? I mean, that is the foundation of how you do it, how these other programs have done it. Who cares? I mean, Tennessee's doing what they have to do. I mean, they're doing what every other program's doing. They're just doing it a little bit better right now.
Tennessee is on the bleeding edge of this whole thing. I think rightfully so. It pisses those guys off because arguably Tennessee is kind of dancing on the line. They are. I don't think there's any denying that. And other schools,
and Alabama and Georgia would not be, if Tennessee was not doing this right now with the NIL stuff, where it's really been so public. Nick Saban and Kirby Smart wouldn't be vocal about the NIL stuff. No coach would, because why would it matter? Because if Tennessee's not using it to their advantage, then it's not this huge story that it's been over the last couple of months, because they are the program that's kind of been kind of the face of these NIL deals. So for these Alabama fans to say, oh, Nick Saban doesn't care about Tennessee, or Georgia fans to say Kirby Smart couldn't care less what's going on in Tennessee and recruiting, then why are they talking about it? Why is it even coming up? Because Tennessee's the main program utilizing this stuff. And then, USC, Miami, those programs don't really impact Alabama and Georgia as much.
Looking through some of these other comments, Alabama and Nick Saban aren't afraid of Tennessee, lol. That's such a hot take. And to me, that's not necessarily a rebuttal. But you go, well, you're watching a video about how Saban is scared. You're looking for this stuff. You want to listen to it. You care. They're kind of like it's one of those situations where they have to denigrate. There were some comments. Let me look back. They said, imagine paying $8 million and not even getting the best QB in the class. Well, Tennessee didn't even try for Arch Manning.
Wisely, because they would have wasted the entire summer on that situation. And Arch Manning is not going to be swayed by a massive NIL deal. Now, I'm sure he'll get paid some money. He'd be foolish not to utilize his what he's built for himself and what kind of his name provides. But I don't know that Josh Heupel's system was what he wants. He's a more traditional background. So Tennessee was very smart to not get involved there.
This person said, enjoy Nico for 1 year. He'll be there before he enters the transfer portal and dips to the school that Manning didn't go to. Nobody fears Tennessee and nobody will. He's called us bozos. But that's a funny, dude. That's a funny, I will say that's a funny word. I like bozos. If you're going to call us, there's a lot of idiot, moron out there. Those are the more boilerplate words. I like bozo. That's kind of out of left field. And he says, these two bozos are just overly excited for Tennessee. Maybe. But here's what I do know. Again, you're watching the video and you commented and you feel compelled enough to say, no, we're not scared. We're not. Nobody's scared of Tennessee. Why? How am I supposed to believe that? And yet you're here. It's methinks you doth protest too much. You know what I mean? We're not scared. We're not concerned about this. We're not concerned that Tennessee got the number 2 quarterback in this class. I don't know. We're not concerned about that. That Tennessee didn't do anything last year and still got this kid. You should be concerned. You should be concerned about that. It's okay. It's okay that you can go like, oh, Tennessee might have a little momentum. I'm not saying Tennessee is going to turn around and win a national championship next year. I think we all know that they're not. And I'm not saying they're even going to win it the next year. It's going to take a while to build this thing up. But you should be concerned long term. That Tennessee is finally getting 5-star recruits again? Yeah. Why would you not be? It's foolish.
I sent it to you last week at some point where the Georgia website Dog post, I believe, where the guy that works for them made an entire YouTube video based on this Nick Saban, Kirby Smart being afraid of Tennessee. Named us, named A to Z Sports, and kind of laughed and rolled his eyes a little bit and made some interesting suggestions. Somebody had sent that video to me, but yeah, it's obviously it's reached them as well, and they felt strongly enough about it that they had to make a rebuttal where they kind of suggest that like the NCAA is not going to listen to Kirby Smart and Nick Saban. Like, yes, they are, especially Nick Saban. If you think they're not listening to what the highest profile coach in college sports says or thinks about a situation, you're absolutely crazy. Like, where are you living? Of course they are.
I mean, I'll make a concession, and I'll do it for Georgia. It's like Georgia a couple years ago in basketball. They get Anthony Edwards to commit to Georgia, and I still don't know how they did that. Tom Crean, however that pickup. I mean, he was one of the top recruits in America, and yeah, Georgia had been in the absolute dumpster up to that point, but you look and you go like, whoa, that's big. That's a really big recruit for Georgia. And it turns out Tom Crean just might be a really bad coach. And, he sort of wasted those talents. But I didn't look at that and go like, this isn't concerning to me. I went, whoa, that's a really, really good player. Yeah, he's going to a garbage dump team. I'm interested to see what Crean can do. And I would say Tennessee last year was not as bad as Georgia basketball has been in the last few years. But which to me, this should be even more concerning than Tennessee picking up a good quarterback, and especially with Josh Heupel's offense that gave Alabama and Georgia both fits. I'll say I didn't just brush it off and go like, no, that's a nothing. I don't care. No, I cared. Like, yeah, you stunk, but you're picking up one of the best players in America. That is, and you're right down the road, and you're right here, and we recruit against you. Anthony Edwards should have come to Tennessee, in my opinion, but he didn't. He went to Georgia. That is concerning to me. And
It's just like South Carolina right now, Spencer Rattler. I mean, you hope as a Tennessee fan that the guy is overrated. I mean, he didn't really show at Oklahoma that he was going to really live up to the hype, but you also know the hype's there for a reason. And hey, I think every Tennessee fan saw Spencer Rattler go to South Carolina and thinking like, I hope he doesn't turn out to be like the next Joe Burrow that comes out from transfers and just burst onto the scene, and all of a sudden South Carolina is like one of the teams to beat in the SEC East. They're a lot more difficult to beat. I mean, we've seen that all it takes is a dynamic, game-changing quarterback to change the entire season for a program. And I think that's why you've seen so many Tennessee fans kind of downplaying his addition to South Carolina, because it's kind of like, well, we're not going to talk it into existence type approach. So, yeah, of course, I mean, I'm sure South Carolina fans will disagree, but and it's not the same gap, but Tennessee views South Carolina probably a little like Alabama and Georgia view Tennessee. So I think it's a fair thing to be concerned. Like, hey, Nico shows up and he's the next Cam Newton type player. Tennessee could be in for a year where, hey, they finally beat us or something like that.
Yeah, I think it's a thought that you would be foolish to not have. I agree on the Rattler thing. We do have a little more certifiable evidence that he's not that guy, at least in Lincoln Riley's offense. I mean, he was sporadic.
Which is kind of what South Carolina's is going to be.
Yeah, that's
under
true.
Beamer.
But you just sporadic reports that he's not a great teammate, that he's kind of an arrogant, sort of all for me kind of guy. And, there's things like that. But of course, like you're saying, it could flip on a dime and he could end up being that dude. And yeah, I
think Tennessee fans are aware that he's there.
Yes, I would be lying if I said those thoughts did not go through my head. And sure, I am 1A when it comes to people who made fun of the Rattler edition. I will say, and sure, I'll have to eat those words. But I will also readily admit in this conversation, I'm not going to go out and be like, no, the thought has not crossed my mind that he could be good. Like, it has. He was a 5-star player coming out of college, and he was good enough to make Lincoln Riley want to bring him to Oklahoma. And so, like, yeah, I could see it. I don't have a ton of faith in Shane Beamer necessarily, but like, it's still like I'm still trying to decide how much faith I have in Josh Heupel. I mean, it's first year. Well, I guess Beamer's a true first year coach. Heupel has a little more experience under his belt, but like, so first year at the program that they're at, sort of coaches, we're feeling it out. And I just thought that this whole thing was funny. That was the bulk of the comments. They're all kind of like that. We're like, we're not scared. We're definitely not concerned. These guys are bozos. It was a lot of that. And that's okay. It's okay. It's okay that you're concerned. And like I said, scared is probably an overstatement. Yeah, you're probably not scared, but you should look around and be like, if we don't get Arch Manning, it would have been nice to be able to get that kid.
And one of those programs is not.
Yeah, one of them's not getting Arch Manning. You can't go both places. So one of you is going to be wanting a quarterback here in a minute.
Both of them might be. He could end up in Texas.
Yeah, well, that's true. They both might be one. That's true, because Texas is kind of.
I think that's where his heart is. Not to get too far into Arch Manning recruitment, but I think his heart is at Texas and with Sarkisian. But he needs to see them take a step forward in this season before he signs up for that.
If Texas puts it together and they actually get him, and like Sark improves a little bit, I honestly, for his legacy, I think that's the right choice. I obviously say, full disclosure, it's a bias of me being like, please, dear God, don't go to Alabama. But I really do say, I could see it from his point of view being like, I'm just going to get out of the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
Not going to go tie myself to Alabama. Not going to go tie myself to Georgia. I'll go step out to this sort of third party over here. And he's from Louisiana, and Louisiana and Texas are they got cultural crossover because they share a
Mhm.
border, and a lot of recruits go to Texas A&M out of
Right.
Louisiana. A lot of Texas recruits go to LSU, and so to me, that choice would make sense. As much as I kind of go like Texas is a joke of a program at the moment, who almost fired their coach after one season this offseason. Yeah, I mean, I could see that. It makes sense to me that obviously, and that they can put up the money. Texas can put up
Oh
that kind of
yeah.
money that Arch would probably be looking for. And so, yeah, that choice would make sense. And man, what a relief to everybody else in the SEC that would be, to be like, okay, if we see him, it's going to be in 2025 when he's like a junior, and maybe just for 1 year we'll have to deal with the guy. But
I mean, I don't I find it hard to believe that Alabama and Georgia and I know LSU didn't because they're pursuing others. They weren't really. I mean, they were pursuing Arch Manning because they're supposed to. He's from Louisiana, but the Mannings and LSU they kind of spurned them a few times. But Alabama and Georgia, I refuse to believe that both of those coaches were so short sighted that they put all of their eggs in the Arch Manning basket and refuse to recruit Nico. Like I just don't feel like that's the case because they each know that one of them's going to miss out, and they have to if they're smart, if they're making contingency plans, they have to know that.
I was looking to see who is remaining. Malachi Nelson is already committed to SC. He's the other sort of elite quarterback in there. Dante Moore. I forgot
And
about him.
that's
In
an
their players.
LSU Notre Dame battle right there. Pretty much, Brian Kelly was hard on him at Notre Dame, and
Yeah.
that's really the LSU's guy. I mean, they've
Mm-hmm.
obviously done the work on Arch Manning, but that's like their Nico, who they're really focusing on. So I don't think
The only other 5-star is Jaden Rashada. And looks like Alabama is not in his top set of schools. Ole Miss, LSU, Miami, Cal, and Oregon, Texas A&M.
I really think we're
So
going to see Alabama and Lane Kiffin is already doing it, starting to do it, kind of, and Georgia maybe. Georgia, it's hard to see them really starting to land elite quarterbacks because of the way their offense runs. It's very run heavy. Just one reason that I feel like Arch probably has a good relationship with Kirby Smart because Kirby comes from that same era as Eli and Peyton and Cooper. They kind of, Peyton played against him. He's kind of friend of the family type deal. But I think you're going to see Alabama, Ole Miss, a lot of these programs just really start to hammer the transfer portal and get these guys to come. They go to Missouri and have an unexpected great year or something like that, and then Alabama's going to scoop them up.
that is the outlier to this whole thing. That it makes the playing field more even, but I think you're still going to have the same phenomenon as just regular recruiting before, where the rich just get richer. It is just going to be, and hopefully Tennessee can get into that rich category and be one of the folks that gets richer, because obviously Tennessee has the resources. I think that is something that is, no matter what these Alabama fans say or whatever happens, you simply cannot deny that Tennessee has the resources. Do we have to pay $1 million to get a quarterback to come to Tennessee? Supposedly, theoretically, allegedly, yes. But the thing is, Tennessee got $8 million to give out. That's the thing that you can't deny. And there's a whole bunch of schools that don't have that power. And so you have to deal with that. And we're right on your doorstep, and we're coming for your guys. We're coming to go get the guys that would have gone to Alabama instead of Tennessee. So I get it. You may not be scared, quote unquote. That might be a strong word that I use as a clickbait title on YouTube. But you should be concerned. You should be. Because this is a powerful brand with a lot of money and a lot of resources behind it. So just wanted to address that. I thought it was funny just because that's the first time I've posted on YouTube and gotten comment bombed by an opposing fan base. So I thought it was kind of funny just wanted to reply. I thought Tennessee fans. There were also Tennessee fans in there that were very supportive. I like this G Smith. He said, "We don't give a damn about the whole state of Alabama." Yes, sir. Thank you for the support and the listen.
When Tennessee does beat Alabama again, and it'll happen. I just don't know when. They better have a locker room video of that song being sung, and it better be posted quickly.
That will be the day. Literally, it's like if you could win the SEC championship or beat Alabama. So like you win the SEC championship, but you lose to Alabama, or you beat Alabama and don't win the SEC championship. I might choose beat Alabama. Like it's because it's and the SEC championship game is obviously win over, I don't know, LSU, somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't know, man. That's going to be a day that will be so gratifying. I do want it to be against Saban, though.
Yeah.
I want to beat him while Saban is still here. That's key. A win over Alabama while Saban is still here.
That's a good question. You should take that to Twitter and see what kind of responses.
Yeah, it's an interesting poll. You can talk about it on next week's show. But I think that's it. Zach, anything else for the good folks at home that you might want to mention before we move on to next week?
I think technically we recorded this on Tuesday. Yesterday was a real busy day. Tennessee got a basketball commitment this morning, not long before we recorded, so I think our streak kind of continues.
Yes, that's true. So we didn't get one.
Still waiting on the check to come in from Tennessee to cover this. We're going to keep doing this in good faith because I know that check's going to come. I'm just waiting on it daily. So
I hope they have heard. They've heard the connection between the podcast and recruits committing to Tennessee. Maybe someday soon. Yes, we got one today. We did miss last week. You can't win them all. You know, it's you're not just gonna bat 100. That's not nobody does that. But this week we got another one. So hey, I'll still say it. Tennessee, hello somebody. Write a check for the boys. We need it. We got to put food on the table. You know, so. We'll see if they respond. I'm Charlie Burris. That is Zach Ragan. This is the A to Z Sports Big Orange Podcast. Thank you so much for listening every week. Show has been growing. Those clips on YouTube, man, they pop off. And most weeks it's not Alabama fans that are watching. It has been actual Tennessee fans that watch, and the response has been awesome. So appreciate everybody that's watching those. At Charlie_Burris, at ZachTD, at A to Z Sports, Facebook.com/A to Z Sports, Nashville, A to Z Sports.com for the stuff that we write on the internet. A to Z Sports Podcast Network feed, rate, review, subscribe, and YouTube.com. Search up A to Z Sports and subscribe and hit that little notification bell on there, and we would appreciate it. And to anybody that is still watching on YouTube, you are a trooper. You will notice over my face right now that there are videos, or at least in a second, there will be videos that pop up that are suggested videos that are more of me and Zach talking about them Vols. And you should click on those too. And you should listen to them because we got a whole back catalog at this point of Big Orange Podcast. So that is it. Thank you again for listening. And we'll talk to y'all next week.
See you guys later.